A very good morning. After having listened yesterday to the different presentations, I decided to not use the PowerPoint presentation I had prepared for today, because it would lead us to some cases that then are repeated and repeated, and I thought that we did not need that. I did distribute some documents on commons and on social commons. They're on your table, so if you're interested in all the details, please read them. I recommend lecture of these documents. I think it can help you to better understand. I will just try briefly to simply, in simple words, explain what it is all about. Yesterday, David Hall, I think, told us something about PPs, public-public partnerships. And Miriam spoke about the citizens' platforms in Barcelona and in Spain. And I think Mladen told us something about citizens' organizations getting involved in the transport sector in Croatia. Now, these are all steps towards commons. Because what commons are basically about is democratization, a major role for citizens, and citizens participating in the decision making. So that's what it's about. And I was a bit surprised yesterday that all these people were talking about these practices without using the word commons. Whereas in Europe, we are a bit afraid that commons might become a buzzword, that people are talking about commons without knowing what it is, and at the same time, commons using its political meaning. So we have to take care. We have to take care and see what exactly we are talking about and what we want to achieve. I think that at this moment, very, very broadly speaking, there are two different ways of speaking of commons. The first way is a kind of apolitical way. It is commons at the community level, at the local level. It is people living what they think is in harmony with each other, finding common solutions for common problems at the local level. Now, of course, we know that harmony does not exist. There are always conflicts, and everywhere there are conflicts. So, it will not surprise you that I will rather promote a political model, a political way of thinking about commons, which is a conflict model. Because what we want to achieve, do you hear me? Yep. What we want to achieve will always require a social struggle. There are conflicts. There is a class conflict. There are other kinds of conflict. So we should not forget that. It is not a harmony model of everyone loving each other, even not on Valentine's Day. We have to fight for what we want to achieve. And in that model, and in that way, what I am saying is complementary to what David Hall and Barry and Satoko have been telling us. Scale is not important. We can fight for what we want at the local level, at the national level, at the municipal level, at the global level. That is less important, because there is no scale that is, per definition, more democratic than any other. You can have repressive states, you can have municipal solutions that are not democratic, you can have global solutions that are not democratic, and most of them are not democratic, but they can be democratic. States can be democratic, municipalities can be democratic. So we have to look at what level we want to fight, we need to fight, and there introduce the necessary democracy that we need. If you do this, and then you may say this is utopia, but I do not think it is utopia. This may lead to a new kind of thinking, a new kind of philosophy, a new kind of politics, a new kind of participation, a new kind of social relationships. And that may lead, and I will try to explain it, that may lead to systemic change. I think the systemic change we all badly want and need. Now, how can it happen? First of all, I have to say that commons is nothing new. The concept comes from the Middle Ages, where people had their common goods, the planet itself, the forests, the seas, all the things that people lived from. This was collective ownership. And this collective ownership, you can say you have natural resources, natural commons, such as the forest, etc., etc. You also have our knowledge. Our knowledge, per definition, is collective. You cannot build knowledge all on your own. You always build on the knowledge built and constructed by other people and by other groups. So knowledge, per definition, is or should be a common. And you have a social commons or human rights. They did not fall out of the sky. There was a social struggle to construct, to build human rights, economic rights, social rights, environmental rights, labor rights, public services. These are our collective ownership. These are ours. These are ours, and if they are not ours at this moment, we should reclaim them. Somebody yesterday asked, what does this reclaim mean? That's what it means. Because we have been through a whole process of 30, 40 years of privatizations, of extractivism, of dismantlement of our welfare states, dismantlement of our economic and social rights. This was robbery. This was theft. We have to reclaim what is ours. And that is what commons are about. The building of power, the building of, again, collective ownership. That is what we, as citizens, with our organizations, trade unions, social movements, should do. That is the task. Build commons. Now, as I said, the level is not important, but it should be about the whole process. It should be about conceptualizing what kind of social services, public services do we want? How will we use them? Who will have access to them? How will we regulate them? And how can we monitor it? Now take care. If I say that this is a task for citizens and their organizations, it does not mean that we do not need states. Of course we need states. Of course we need public authorities. We need them for raising taxes, for redistribution, for guaranteeing our human rights, for having rules concerning security, non-discrimination, etc. So what we usually say when talking about commons is that if we need states and public authorities, they will have to be different. They will themselves have to become a kind of public service. They will themselves have to be at the service of citizens. So we will have other kinds of states. We will need other kinds of markets. We will not have to ban markets, but our markets should not be allowed to function according to a liberal market logic. What is essential in commons and social commons is the use value, not the exchange value. So there can be a price, but that price should not be a market price on the basis of the exchange value. The same with private property. We are not, per definition, against private property, but private property of whatever should never lead to absolute rights on that property. So you can have a forest, let's say, in private hands, but that does not mean that the owner of these forests can prohibit other people to come into the forest. I mean, it's like a house you can own, and there is a tenant in the house. That, per definition, limits your rights as an owner to do with the house what you want to do with the house, because you have to take into account the tenant. So yes, you can have private property. Not that we promote private property, but you can have private property, but they should never ever lead to absolute rights on that property. It should remain a common, as it was again in the Middle Ages. Many of these forests where people were excluded from were private property. But people had the right to come and harvest the products of the forests. So that is a way in which you can overcome a lot of dichotomies, a lot of contradictions, state and market, private, public. And that can help. Maybe again you will say this is utopia, but it can help to overcome some of the difficulties we have within progressive forces to do what we want to do. Let us look at what we need as common, as collective rights and properties. Let's focus on these points. And if we do that, I think we can go a very long way. And if I say that it can lead to systemic change, then again I refer in fact to what Vittorio was saying yesterday. If we want preventive health systems, of course we need water. Of course we need to prohibit corporations to use toxic substances in foodstuff, in agriculture. We need the possibility to prohibit genetically modified organisms, all these kind of things. And if you work on this consistently, then you do come to change that goes further than just the superficial changes when working purely on the level of rights and nothing else. And that means, and this is my conclusion, sorry, that commons can become a strategic tool to work not only for our collective ownership, not only for what we have in common and want to achieve in common, but also for systemic change. And there is one thing that was not mentioned yesterday, and that is, I think, a crucial element that we should not forget. What we need, of course, as citizens, is power. We need to construct and build power collectively. We need our parliaments, we need our municipal councils, we need our own democratic organizations to build power, because without power, we will do nothing. We will achieve nothing. And I think we can do a lot with all the things that Barry and David Hall have been saying yesterday morning. There is such a lot of influence that we can or could have if we use the instruments that are available already, through our parliaments, through our councils, and again, through our own organizations. Working together, get organized, coordinate with and between different organizations. So let me finish by that. I mentioned the elements that Vittorio was mentioning yesterday about patents and the common knowledge, and the possibility that I just mentioned for prohibiting toxic substances, etc., etc., etc. What you see there is an immediate and direct link between social justice and environmental justice. And in that way, if you pursue on that line, work on that line, organize on that line, then commons and social commons can become a strategic tool for sustainability. For life, life of nature, life of humans. And I think also that not only you can, as we do today, defend and promote our individual rights, but also our collective rights, and in doing so, defending and protecting our societies. Don't forget Margaret Thatcher, who said there is no such thing as society. There is society, and we should defend and protect our societies, because this is our power. As an individual, we have no power. But if individuals, citizens, organize, they can build power. And that is what social commons are about: democratization, participation, organization. I think if we pursue on that line, and many of the things I know, many of the things still have to be made concrete. But I think that we heard many examples already from Barcelona, from the transport sector, what we heard about municipalization from Satoko. I think there are really concrete possibilities. There is a huge potential for building power. Thank you.